Okay, so let's take a look at 3A number 18. So in this problem, we're gonna look at different angles and determine if the properties that are given, like they're congruent or they add up to 180, forces any lines to be parallel. And so the way we get parallel lines, I've given these 5 ways over here. Okay, so each pair or triple of angles that we look at, we're trying to figure out if we get any of these properties over here that give us parallel lines over here. All right. So in part A, it says angles 3 is congruent to angle 12. And in order to get these angles, we need 3 lines. We need the 2 lines that are going to be parallel and the one that crosses them. So the goal is always to figure out which 3 lines form the angles that we're talking about. Okay, so if I look at 3 and 12, let me get another color here. Angle 3 is formed by this line here and this line here. And angle 12 is formed by the same first line along here and the bottom line right here. And so if I highlight 3 and 12, maybe you can't see it yet, but if I move this over, you can kind of tell that 3 and 12 here, they're in the same location in each chunk, right? They're each in the top left. Those are corresponding angles. And we're told they're congruent. 3 is congruent to 12. So that means that these 2 lines are going to be parallel right here. So for part A, I'm going to write, now the top line is BC, and the bottom line is DF. So BC is parallel to DF because corresponding angles that are congruent give me parallel lines. Okay, if we look at B, B says 4 plus 5 plus 8 equals 180. So that's not even a pair of angles, that's a triplet, right? So what I want to do is I'm going to kind of use a little trick here and put 4 and 5 together. So really I'm looking at this whole angle right here. So now if I trace out the lines that form 4 and 5 put together, it's that line and this one going across. And then if I look at angle 8, which is my other angle, it's formed by this line and then the same line right here. Right? And so if I move these over, right, they're on the same side of the transversal and they're interior because they're in between my parallel lines. So they're same side interior. If they're supplementary, then I get parallel lines, and they are because they equal 180 here. So I can say in this case BC is parallel to DF because this one's BC here and this one's DF here. So BC is parallel to DF because same side interior angles that are supplementary give parallel lines. Okay. C. 1's congruent to 7. Here's 1, here's 7. So let's see if we can figure out which 3 lines might help us here. So 1 and 7 share this line, right? And then 1 also uses this one, and 7 uses this one. And then there are no other lines that are involved with those 2 angles. So if you look at those 2, they're both in the bottom of each chunk here. Right, here's one chunk, here's the other chunk. So they correspond to each other. And we're told that they're congruent, and if corresponding angles are congruent, we get parallel lines. So in this case, this angle here, this line right here is the top part, right? So it's AB or AD, and the other one is CE here. Whoops, I didn't line this up right. Right about there. So it's AD and CE. So AD is parallel to CE because corresponding angles that are congruent give parallel lines. Okay, for D, I'm running out of room here, so let me get this out of the way right now. Okay, so for D, we've got 4 is congruent to 7. Well, here's 4, here's 7. And 4 is formed by these two lines, and 7 is formed by these two lines. And if you notice, they're independent of each other. So these two lines for angle 4 are completely different from the two lines for angle 7. So nothing is actually forced to be parallel here because I don't have pairs of angles that I can look at the same way. Instead, I've got one line here, 2 lines here, 3 lines here, 4 lines here. Remember, these are formed by 2 lines and 1 transversal, which is not what's happening here. These require 3 lines. This one uses 4. So the answer for D is none are forced to be parallel. Maybe there are some parallel ones, but we can't prove it based on that info. For E, I've got angle 4 here and angle 10 here. Okay, so for E, let's trace out those two angles. Here's 4, and here's 10 using the same line and this one. Here's 4, and here's 10. Well, they form that Z shape. They're on opposite sides, so alternate sides of the transversal, and they're on the interior. So they're alternate interior angles. We know that they're congruent. So I can say, let's see, let's put this back. So that's going to be lines AD here and CE. And my reason is because alternate interior angles that are congruent give me parallel lines. Then we got one more, 2 and 8. So if you look at 2 here and 8 here, and they're congruent. So 2 and 8 share this line. 2 is formed also by BC here, and 8 is formed by DE or DF if you go all the way out. So if I move these over, right, these are corresponding angles. They're both in the top right of each chunk. So, and they're congruent, which is good, so I get parallel lines. And in this case, it's BC is parallel to DF or DE because corresponding angles that are congruent give parallel